Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
There is a strange paradox at the heart of the twin flame journey, one that many people only understand after years of confusion, longing, and emotional transformation. Union often happens at the exact moment you stop needing them. At first, this idea feels almost impossible to accept. After all, how can a connection that feels so intense, so destined, and so deeply emotional reach fulfillment only when you finally let go of the need for it? Many people begin the twin flame journey believing that union will come through effort, through patience, through loyalty, through proving their love. They wait, they hope, they try to hold on. And yet, the harder they cling to the connection, the more distant it sometimes becomes. Why does this happen? Why does the universe seem to respond in the opposite way we expect? Why does the person who feels like your other half sometimes become the one who disappears when you need them most? These questions haunt many people on this path. But the answer lies hidden inside one of the most important spiritual lessons of all: the difference between love and attachment. When people first meet their twin flame, the experience can feel electrifying. It is not like an ordinary relationship. There is an instant sense of familiarity, as if you have known this person long before this lifetime. Conversations feel effortless. Silence feels comfortable. Eye contact alone can feel overwhelming. It is as if something deep within your soul recognizes them. Many describe the moment as coming home. But the same intensity that makes the connection beautiful can also make it destabilizing. Because the connection doesn't only reflect your love, it also reflects your wounds, your fears, your insecurities, your deepest unmet emotional needs. When the mirror appears, it shows everything. And suddenly, the person who once felt like peace can also become the source of your greatest emotional turmoil. You begin thinking about them constantly. You check your phone more often than you used to. A message from them can brighten your entire day, while silence from them can create a storm of doubts in your mind. You start asking questions you never asked before. Why haven't they replied? Did I say something wrong? Do they still feel the connection the way I do? Without realizing it, your emotional balance slowly begins to depend on their presence. Or worse, their attention. At this point, something subtle but powerful begins to happen within the energetic dynamic between the two of you. The connection shifts. Instead of two people meeting from a place of wholeness, the relationship begins to revolve around a quiet sense of lack. You begin to feel that you need them in order to feel complete. Need their validation. Need their love. Need their reassurance. But here is the deeper truth that the twin flame journey eventually reveals. Need is not the same as love. Love expands. Need contracts. Love gives freedom. Need creates pressure. And even when nothing is said out loud, energy can communicate what words never do. The more you feel that you need someone to complete you, the more the connection begins to carry the weight of expectation. Expectation creates tension. Tension creates distance. This is why so many twin flame journeys enter what is often called the runner and chaser phase. One person feels the connection deeply and begins to move toward it with urgency. The other feels the intensity just as strongly, but instead of moving closer, they begin to step back. Sometimes they withdraw emotionally. Sometimes they become distant. Sometimes they disappear completely. To the one left behind, this can feel heartbreaking and confusing. How can someone who felt so connected suddenly act like a stranger? How can something that felt so real suddenly vanish? The pain of this stage can be profound, because it does not feel like an ordinary breakup. It feels like losing a piece of your own soul. Yet hidden inside this painful separation is the beginning of the true transformation that the twin flame journey is meant to create. The journey was never designed to make you dependent on someone else. It was designed to bring you back to yourself. In the early stages, the connection awakens the heart. But in the deeper stages, it awakens the soul. And the soul has a very different goal than the ego. The ego wants reassurance. The ego wants control. The ego wants certainty. but the soul seeks growth, healing, awareness. And sometimes the only way to reach that growth is through separation. Because separation forces you to face a question that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. Who are you when the person you love is no longer there to validate you? When the messages stop? When the conversations fade? When the silence stretches longer than you expected? At first, the instinct is to fight the silence, to chase, to explain, to try harder. But eventually, something inside you becomes tired. Not tired of loving them, but tired of losing yourself. And that is the moment when the real journey begins. The moment when you slowly begin to turn your attention inward. Instead of asking, "How can I get them back?" you begin asking a new question. How can I come back to myself? This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because the twin flame journey is not ultimately about finding someone else. It is about remembering the wholeness that already exists within you. Union does not begin when two people hold on to each other out of fear. Union begins when two people no longer need each other in order to feel complete. That is the paradox. And that is the lesson that the first stage of this journey begins to reveal. The deeper truth is that the connection is not trying to take something away from you. It is trying to give something back. Your independence. Your inner peace. Your self-love. And as strange as it may sound, the moment you truly rediscover those things is often the moment the possibility of union finally begins to appear. In the beginning of the twin flame journey, everything feels powerful, magnetic, and almost magical. The connection seems to awaken something deep within you, something you may never have felt before. It is not just attraction. It is not just chemistry. It feels like recognition. Many people describe the moment they meet their twin flame as if time suddenly slows down. Something about the way the other person speaks, moves, or even looks at them feels strangely familiar. Conversations flow with unusual ease. Silence between them doesn't feel awkward. It feels comfortable, meaningful, almost sacred. You might find yourself thinking, where has this person been my whole life? How can someone I just met feel so close to me? The experience can feel like discovering a missing piece of your soul. And this is where the first illusion begins to form. Because when something feels that powerful, the mind naturally assumes one thing. I need this person. At first, the feeling seems harmless. It even feels romantic. After all, love stories have taught us that needing someone is the ultimate proof of love. Movies glorify it. Songs celebrate it. Stories repeat the same message over and over again. You are incomplete until you find the one. So, when the twin flame connection appears, the emotional intensity can easily convince you that you have finally found the person who will complete your life. But beneath the beauty of the connection, something subtle begins to take shape. Your emotional center slowly begins to shift away from yourself. Instead of being grounded within your own inner stability, your sense of happiness starts depending on another person's presence. At first, the changes are small. You check your phone more often than before. You feel excitement when you see their name appear on the screen. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering if certain moments meant something deeper. These behaviors might seem normal at first, especially when you are developing feelings for someone. But in the twin flame journey, the emotional intensity often accelerates these patterns. What begins as affection can slowly transform into emotional dependence. And emotional dependence is very different from love. Love flows freely. Dependence seeks reassurance. Love feels expansive. Dependence feels anxious. You might notice that your mood begins to rise and fall based on their attention. If they respond quickly, you feel happy and calm. If they take longer than usual to reply, you begin to wonder what changed. If they seem distant for a day, your mind fills with questions. Did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? Do they still feel what I feel? These thoughts may not even reflect reality, but the emotional intensity of the connection amplifies every small signal. Suddenly, their silence feels loud. Their absence feels heavy. And without realizing it, your inner peace begins to depend on something outside of you. This is the illusion of emotional dependence. It convinces you that the connection is the source of your happiness. But in truth, the connection is only reflecting what already exists within you. The twin flame mirror is powerful because it amplifies both love and fear. It amplifies your longing for connection, but it also amplifies your fear of loss. Many people on this journey discover that the connection awakens wounds they did not know they carried. Old fears from childhood. Fears of abandonment. Fears of rejection. Fears of not being enough. When these fears rise to the surface, the mind tries to protect itself in the only way it knows how. By holding on tighter. By seeking reassurance. By trying to secure the connection. But the more you try to secure it, the more fragile it can begin to feel. Because true connection cannot grow inside a space of fear. It can only grow inside freedom. This is why the twin flame dynamic often reaches a point where the energy becomes unbalanced. One person begins to move toward the connection with urgency. They feel the bond deeply and want clarity, closeness, and confirmation. The other person feels the same intensity, but instead of moving forward, they feel overwhelmed. The energy becomes too heavy, too intense, too emotionally demanding, and their instinct becomes distance. Sometimes this distance appears slowly. Messages become shorter. Conversations become less frequent. Plans become uncertain. Other times the shift happens suddenly. The person who once felt so present suddenly becomes unavailable. Emotionally, mentally, or even physically. For the person experiencing this from the other side, the confusion can be overwhelming. How can someone who felt so connected suddenly pull away? Why would someone leave a connection that felt so real? But the answer often has little to do with love and everything to do with energy. When a relationship begins to carry the weight of emotional dependence, it no longer feels like a space of freedom. It begins to feel like responsibility, pressure, expectation. Even if these expectations are never spoken aloud, they can still be felt. Energy communicates far more than words. And when someone feels that they are responsible for another person's emotional stability, the instinctive reaction is often to step back. Not necessarily because they do not care, but because the connection no longer feels light. It no longer feels safe. This is one of the most painful lessons in the twin flame journey, because the love may still exist, but the dynamic surrounding the love becomes unsustainable. And so the universe introduces the next stage of the journey. Distance, separation, silence. At first, this phase feels like loss, but in reality, it is the beginning of healing. Because separation reveals something that emotional dependence had hidden. The truth that your happiness was never meant to come from another person. It was always meant to grow from within. The twin flame connection does not appear to complete you. It appears to reveal where you have forgotten your own completeness. And when the illusion of emotional dependence begins to dissolve, a new question slowly begins to emerge. If my happiness cannot depend on them, then where does it come from? That question marks the beginning of the most important transformation in the entire journey. The transformation from needing love to becoming love. And once that transformation begins, everything about the connection starts to change. One of the most confusing and painful parts of the twin flame journey is the moment when everything seems to shift. In the beginning, the connection feels effortless. Conversations flow naturally. The bond feels mutual, alive, and deeply magnetic. There is laughter, curiosity, and a sense that both of you are discovering something rare together. Then, slowly, something changes. The energy that once felt light begins to feel heavy. The conversations become shorter. The silence between messages becomes longer. The warmth that once felt natural suddenly feels uncertain. And the question that begins to echo in the mind is always the same. What happened? Many people believe the distance must have been caused by something they said or did. They replay conversations over and over, searching for the exact moment when things went wrong. But in many twin flame connections, the shift is not caused by a single moment. It is caused by a change in energy. The deeper truth is that attachment carries a very different energy than love. At first glance, attachment and love can look almost identical. Both involve deep feelings, emotional connection, and the desire to be close to someone. But beneath the surface, their emotional foundations are completely different. Love comes from fullness. Attachment comes from lack. Love says, I choose you. Attachment says, I need you. Love gives space. Attachment fears distance. Love trusts the connection. Attachment constantly seeks reassurance. When the twin flame connection first begins, both people often experience a sense of emotional expansion. The connection feels inspiring and uplifting because it reflects something beautiful inside both souls. But when attachment begins to form, the emotional dynamic changes. Instead of two whole people sharing love, the connection begins to carry the silent weight of expectation. And expectation has a way of quietly changing the atmosphere of a relationship. Imagine walking into a room where someone expects something from you, even if they never say it out loud. You can feel it. It might appear as subtle pressure, or a sense of responsibility, or even an unspoken emotional demand. This is how attachment often feels on an energetic level. It does not always appear through dramatic behavior. Sometimes it shows up through small patterns. Checking their online status repeatedly. Feeling anxious when they take longer than usual to reply. Reading deeper meaning into every message. Needing confirmation that the connection is still there. None of these reactions make someone weak or flawed. They are human responses to emotional vulnerability. But in the energetic language of the twin flame dynamic, these signals communicate something deeper. They communicate fear. And fear changes the entire energy of the connection. Because when someone feels that another person is emotionally depending on them, the natural instinct for many people is to create distance. Not because they want to hurt the other person, but because the connection no longer feels free. Freedom is an essential ingredient in any deep relationship. When freedom disappears, even love can start to feel like pressure. This is why the twin flame journey often creates what is known as the runner and chaser dynamic. One person feels the connection so strongly that they begin moving closer. They want clarity. They want commitment. They want to understand what the connection means. The other person also feels the intensity, but instead of moving forward, they feel overwhelmed. The depth of the connection triggers their own fears. Fear of losing independence. Fear of emotional vulnerability. Fear of a bond that feels impossible to control. So their instinct becomes withdrawal. Distance becomes their way of restoring balance. To the person experiencing this from the other side, the withdrawal can feel devastating. Because the natural response to distance is to move closer. When someone we love pulls away, our instinct is to reach out, to ask questions, to try to repair the connection, to prove that our love is real. But this is where the paradox of attachment begins to reveal itself. The more someone tries to pull the connection closer through effort, the more the other person may feel the need to create space. It becomes a loop. The chaser moves forward. The runner steps back. The chaser tries harder. The runner withdraws further. And both people end up feeling misunderstood. The chaser feels abandoned. The runner feels overwhelmed. Yet beneath the emotional confusion, something important is happening. The connection is revealing the difference between love and control. Because attachment often disguises itself as love. But hidden inside attachment is a quiet attempt to control the outcome of the relationship. To control whether the person stays. To control how they respond. To control how the connection evolves. But the twin flame journey is not designed to be controlled. It is designed to awaken. And awakening often requires confronting the parts of ourselves that we would rather avoid. The part that fears abandonment. The part that believes we are incomplete without someone else. The part that believes love must be held tightly in order to survive. The twin flame mirror brings these fears to the surface so they can finally be healed. But healing does not happen through holding on tighter. It happens through understanding, through awareness, through learning to recognize the difference between loving someone and needing someone. When someone truly loves from a place of inner balance, the energy they radiate feels very different. It feels calm, open, unpressured. It allows the other person to breathe, to move freely, to come closer not because they feel obligated, but because they feel drawn. And this is the moment when the energy of the connection begins to transform. Because the moment attachment loosens its grip, something unexpected happens. Space returns. Lightness returns. Curiosity returns. Instead of asking, "How do I keep them?" the focus slowly shifts toward a new question. How do I become whole within myself? That question changes everything. Because the twin flame journey is not just about loving another person. It is about discovering a love that exists beyond fear, beyond control, beyond attachment. And the moment someone begins to understand this truth, the entire dynamic of the connection begins to shift. Not because they force the change, but because their energy finally returned to the place where real love can exist. A place where love does not cling. Love simply flows. There comes a moment in many twin flame journeys that feels like the end of everything. A moment when the emotional intensity becomes too heavy to carry. A moment when the questions no longer bring answers, the waiting no longer brings hope, and the silence becomes louder than any words that were ever spoken. This is the breaking point. Not the breaking point of love, but the breaking point of attachment. At the beginning of the journey, the instinct is always to hold on. When the connection feels real, powerful, and almost fated, the natural response is to protect it at all costs. You tell yourself that if you just try a little harder, things will return to how they were. If you explain your feelings more clearly, they will finally understand. If you remain patient long enough, the distance will eventually close. So you wait. You send messages. You revisit memories. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for meaning inside every detail. Sometimes you even convince yourself that the connection must be going through a temporary phase, that everything will return to normal if you simply remain loyal to what you once shared. But time passes. And slowly, something inside you begins to feel different. At first, the change is subtle. The excitement you once felt when your phone lights up begins to mix with anxiety. The hope that once filled your thoughts begins to carry a quiet weight of exhaustion. You still care. You still remember how powerful the connection felt. But the emotional energy required to hold on to it begins to drain you. It feels like trying to keep a flame alive in the middle of a storm. You protect it. You shield it. You refuse to let it disappear. But every gust of wind threatens to extinguish it again. And eventually, the question you have been avoiding finally appears. How long can I keep doing this? This question does not come from anger. It does not come from resentment. It comes from something deeper. It comes from the soul. Because the soul does not measure love through suffering. The soul measures love through truth. And at some point, the soul begins to recognize when a connection is no longer being held with balance. Many people on the twin flame journey experience this realization after months or even years of emotional turbulence. They reach a place where the constant cycle of hope and disappointment becomes too painful to sustain. They begin to notice how much of their life has been placed on hold. Dreams postponed. Plans delayed. Moments missed because their attention remained focused on someone who is no longer present. It is not that they stop loving their twin flame, but they begin to realize that loving someone should not require losing themselves. And that realization creates an emotional turning point. Because for the first time since the connection began, they start to shift their focus away from the other person. They begin asking questions that had been buried beneath longing. What about my life? What about my happiness? What about the person I was before this journey consumed my thoughts? These questions can feel uncomfortable at first. Part of the heart still hopes that the other person will return, still hopes that the connection will suddenly make sense again. But another part of the heart, the quieter, wiser part, begins to recognize a difficult truth. Chasing cannot create union. No matter how sincere the love may be, a relationship cannot grow when only one person is holding it together. This realization does not always arrive in a dramatic moment. Sometimes it appears slowly, like a quiet sunrise after a long night. You wake up one morning and notice something different. The urge to check your phone has faded. The emotional reaction to their silence is less intense. You still think about them, but the thoughts no longer control your entire day. And in that quiet space, a new awareness begins to emerge. You realize how tired you have been, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The constant cycle of hope and uncertainty has drained something deep inside you. And suddenly, the heart reaches a place where it can no longer continue the chase. This is not surrender in the sense of defeat. It is surrender in the sense of awakening. Because the moment the soul becomes tired of chasing is the moment it begins searching for something more meaningful than external validation. It begins searching for peace. Real peace. Not the temporary comfort of receiving a message or seeing their name appear again, but the deeper peace that exists when your emotional stability no longer depends on another person's actions. This stage of the journey is often misunderstood. From the outside, it may look like someone is giving up on the connection. But internally, something much more powerful is happening. They are returning to themselves. They are remembering that their life contains more than one relationship, more than one story, more than one possible future. The energy that was once focused entirely on the twin flame connection slowly begins to move inward, toward healing, toward self-discovery, toward rebuilding the parts of life that had been neglected during the chase. At first, this process can feel strange, even unfamiliar, because the identity of waiting or hoping had become so deeply woven into the emotional landscape of the journey. But as time passes, something beautiful begins to happen. The silence that once felt painful begins to feel peaceful. The distance that once felt unbearable begins to feel spacious. The emotional storm that once consumed every thought begins to calm. And in that calm, the heart finally finds something it had been searching for all along. Freedom. Freedom from constant emotional turbulence. Freedom from the fear of losing someone. Freedom from the exhausting need to control the outcome of the connection. This is the moment when the energy of the twin flame journey truly begins to shift. Because the chase ends, not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. And in that moment, something profound occurs. The person who once felt like they were losing everything suddenly begins to rediscover something they had forgotten. Their own worth, their own peace, their own center. Ironically, this is also the stage where the connection itself begins to change. Because the moment the chase ends, the energetic dynamic that once pushed the two people apart begins to dissolve. But that transformation does not happen because someone forced it. It happens because someone finally stopped running after love and started becoming whole again. After the breaking point arrives, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold within the heart. At first, it does not look like strength. It looks like silence. It looks like someone who simply stops trying. The messages stop. The constant checking of the phone fades. The endless searching for signs and meanings slowly loses its urgency. To an outside observer, this moment might appear as resignation, as if the person has finally given up on the connection. But internally, something far more meaningful is happening. This is the beginning of letting go. And letting go is one of the most misunderstood stages of the entire twin flame journey. Many people believe letting go means abandoning the connection or pretending that the love never existed. They think it requires erasing the memories, suppressing the feelings, or convincing themselves that the relationship no longer matters. But true letting go has nothing to do with denial. It does not ask you to stop loving. It asks you to stop controlling. There is a profound difference between those two things. Love is an emotion. Control is a strategy. Love can exist freely without needing to shape the future. Control, on the other hand, constantly tries to manage the outcome. Earlier in the journey, much of the emotional energy was focused on questions like, when will they come back? What can I do to fix this? How do I make them understand the connection? These questions feel natural when someone is emotionally invested in a relationship. The heart wants resolution. It wants clarity. It wants the uncertainty to disappear. But beneath these questions lies a deeper impulse, the desire to influence what happens next, to guide the connection toward the outcome you hope for, to secure the love you fear losing. Letting go begins the moment you recognize that love cannot be secured through effort. It cannot be negotiated through persistence. It cannot be guaranteed through patience alone. Real love is not something that can be forced into existence. It either flows naturally between two people, or it waits until both are ready to meet each other in truth. This realization can feel frightening at first, because when you release control, you also release certainty. You accept the possibility that the person may never return. You accept that the future may unfold differently than you once imagined. You step into a space where the outcome is no longer something you can predict or manage. For many people, this moment feels like stepping into emotional darkness. The mind begins asking difficult questions. If I stop trying, will the connection disappear completely? If I let go, does that mean it was never meant to be? What if releasing them means losing them forever? These fears are natural because the ego often equates control with safety. It believes that if we hold on tightly enough, we can protect what we love. But the deeper wisdom of the soul understands something very different. The soul understands that anything truly meant for you does not require constant control to remain in your life. Letting go does not push love away. It removes the pressure that was suffocating it. Imagine holding a small bird in your hands. If you grip too tightly, the bird cannot breathe. If you loosen your hands completely, the bird is free to fly away. But if you hold your hands gently, the bird may choose to stay. This is the energy of letting go. It is not about abandoning the connection. It is about removing the grip of fear that was trying to control it. For the first time since the journey began, the heart begins to release its expectations. It stops demanding answers from the future. It stops trying to solve every silence. It stops measuring love through constant reassurance. Instead, something new begins to grow. Trust. Not necessarily trust in the other person, but trust in life itself. Trust that whatever is meant to unfold will do so in its own time. Trust that the connection does not need to be forced in order to be real. Trust that your own life can continue expanding regardless of what happens next. This shift creates a profound transformation within the emotional landscape. Earlier in the journey, every message or absence carried enormous meaning. A delayed reply could ruin an entire day. A sudden appearance could restore weeks of hope. But as letting go deepens, these emotional swings begin to calm. Your mood is no longer determined by their presence. Your sense of worth is no longer tied to their attention. Your peace is no longer dependent on external validation. Instead, your focus slowly returns to something that had been forgotten during the earlier stages of the journey. Your own life, your passions, your dreams, your personal growth. You begin investing energy in yourself again, not as a strategy to attract them back, but as a genuine act of self-respect. You explore new experiences. You reconnect with friends. You rediscover interests that had been neglected. You start building a life that feels meaningful regardless of whether the twin flame connection reappears. And something unexpected begins to happen. The emotional intensity that once felt overwhelming begins to soften. The memory of the connection still exists, but it no longer dominates every thought. You can remember the love without feeling consumed by it. You can appreciate the bond without feeling controlled by it. You can wish them well without needing them to return. This is the true meaning of letting go. It is not the disappearance of love. It is the transformation of love into something lighter, something freer, something that exists without chains. And, ironically, this is also the moment when the energy of the twin flame connection becomes capable of evolving again. Because when love is no longer driven by fear, when attachment loosens its grip, when the heart no longer tries to control what must happen next, the connection finally has space to breathe. It has space to grow naturally, or space to release itself peacefully. Either outcome becomes acceptable, and that acceptance creates something that had been missing from the very beginning of the journey: inner freedom. It is in this freedom that the next stage of the twin flame journey begins to emerge. Not through longing, not through chasing, but through something far more powerful: self-love. After letting go begins, something remarkable starts to unfold inside the heart. At first, it happens quietly. There is no dramatic moment, No sudden realization that everything has changed. Instead, it feels like a slow return, like someone who has been traveling far away for a long time and finally begins the journey home. Because in many ways, that is exactly what self-love represents in the twin flame journey. It is the journey back to yourself. Earlier in the connection, so much emotional energy had been focused outward. Your thoughts revolved around another person. Your happiness fluctuated depending on their presence. Your sense of hope often depended on signs, messages, or moments that reminded you the connection was still alive. But once letting go begins to loosen the grip of attachment, a new question slowly emerges. What about me? This question can feel unfamiliar at first. Not because it is selfish, but because many people on the twin flame journey have spent so much time giving emotional energy away that they forgot what it feels like to direct that energy inward. For a long time, their focus was on understanding the connection, trying to heal the dynamic, trying to bring the two souls closer again. But self-love invites a completely different direction of attention. Instead of asking how the relationship can be repaired, you begin asking how your own life can be rebuilt. Instead of wondering when they will return, you begin wondering who you want to become. This shift marks one of the most powerful transformations in the entire journey. Because self-love does not simply mean liking yourself more. It means recognizing that your life has value beyond any single relationship. It means remembering that your happiness was never meant to depend on someone else's choices. In the beginning, this realization can feel both liberating and uncomfortable. Liberating because it restores a sense of independence that may have been missing for a long time. Uncomfortable because it forces you to confront something honest. How much of yourself you had abandoned while chasing the connection. Many people begin noticing the ways their life had quietly paused. Dreams that were postponed. Creative passions that were ignored. Friendships that received less attention. Moments of joy that were overlooked because the mind remained focused on someone who is not present. When this awareness appears, it can create a wave of emotions. Regret. Sadness. Even guilt for the time that seemed lost. But self-love does not judge the past. Self-love understands that every stage of the journey had a purpose. The longing revealed the depth of your heart. The separation revealed your hidden wounds. And now, the healing reveals your strength. Slowly, you begin reconnecting with parts of yourself that had been waiting patiently in the background. You start investing energy in your personal growth again. You explore interests that once made you feel alive. You spend time nurturing your physical and emotional well-being. Maybe you start exercising more regularly. Maybe you begin journaling or meditating. Maybe you pursue goals that once felt distant because your focus was elsewhere. These actions may seem small at first, but they carry enormous significance. Because each step represents a shift in energy. Instead of searching for validation outside yourself, you begin cultivating fulfillment within yourself. The more you do this, the more something beautiful begins to happen. Your identity expands. Before, your emotional world may have revolved around the twin flame connection. Now, your world becomes larger. You start realizing that life contains countless opportunities for growth, joy, creativity, and connection. The twin flame journey remains part of your story, but it is no longer the entire story. And within this expanded perspective, a deeper form of love begins to grow. Love that is not based on need. Love that is not driven by fear. Love that does not require constant reassurance. This is the beginning of authentic self-love. Authentic self-love means treating yourself with the same kindness you once gave so freely to another person. It means respecting your emotional boundaries. It means recognizing your worth without needing someone else to confirm it. It means understanding that your life deserves to be lived fully, whether the twin flame connection returns or not. This realization changes the energy of everything. Because when someone truly begins to love themselves, their presence becomes different. They carry themselves differently. Their emotional state becomes more stable. Their sense of peace becomes less dependent on external circumstances. Other people can feel this shift immediately. Self-love radiates a quiet confidence that does not need to be announced. It is felt through calmness, through authenticity, through the absence of desperation. Earlier in the journey, love may have felt urgent, intense, and emotionally overwhelming. Now, love begins to feel grounded, balanced, peaceful. And this new energy creates a completely different dynamic within the twin flame connection. Because the person who once felt like they needed the relationship in order to feel whole no longer carries that vibration. Instead, they carry the energy of someone who is already complete. This is one of the most transformative stages of the entire journey. Not because it guarantees reunion, but because it restores the most important relationship you will ever have. The relationship with yourself. And once that relationship becomes strong, something surprising often happens. The fear of losing the twin flame connection begins to fade. Not because the love disappeared, but because your life no longer depends on the outcome. You still care. You still remember the depth of the connection. But you also understand something new. You were never half of a soul waiting to be completed. You were always a whole soul learning to remember your own value. The twin flame did not arrive to fill a void. They arrived to reveal where you had forgotten your own light. And once you reclaim that light through self-love, the entire journey begins to transform again. Because the energy of someone who truly loves themselves creates space for the next stage to emerge. A stage that many people search for without realizing where it actually begins. Inner peace. After the stages of attachment, separation, letting go, and self-love, the twin flame journey reaches a phase that feels very different from everything that came before. Earlier in the journey, emotions were intense. There were highs that felt euphoric and lows that felt unbearable. The connection created waves of longing, hope, confusion, and sometimes even despair. It often felt like living inside a storm, one moment full of light, the next moment lost in clouds of uncertainty. But eventually something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly, almost gently. The emotional storm begins to calm. And in the space where turbulence once existed, something new begins to appear. Inner peace. For many people on the twin flame path, this stage feels unfamiliar at first. After so much emotional intensity, the absence of chaos can feel strange. The mind had become accustomed to analyzing every signal, interpreting every silence, and searching constantly for signs of reunion. But now the mind begins to relax. The constant questions slowly fade. What are they thinking? Will they come back? What does this connection mean for my future? These questions lose their urgency. Not because the answers suddenly became clear, but because the heart no longer needs them in order to feel calm. This is the true beginning of inner peace. Inner peace does not mean that you stop caring about the connection. It does not mean the love disappears. Instead, it means the emotional turbulence surrounding the love dissolves. You still remember them. You still appreciate what the connection awakened in you. But the memories no longer pull you into emotional spirals. They simply exist as part of your story. Earlier in the journey, your thoughts about them may have appeared constantly throughout the day. A song, a place, or even a random memory could trigger hours of reflection. Now, those moments still occur, but they no longer carry the same emotional weight. You notice the memory. You acknowledge it. And then you gently return your attention to the present moment. This is what inner peace feels like. It is not the absence of thoughts. It is the absence of emotional struggle against those thoughts. Many people discover that their daily life begins to feel different during this stage. Simple moments become more meaningful. A quiet walk outside. A conversation with a friend. A moment of laughter. The warmth of sunlight through a window. These experiences, which once felt secondary to the emotional drama of the connection, now become sources of genuine fulfillment. The heart begins to rediscover the beauty of ordinary life. Because the mind is no longer trapped in constant longing. This shift happens because inner peace changes the way energy moves within you. Earlier in the journey, much of your energy was directed toward the future. You wondered what would happen next. You imagined scenarios of reunion. You searched for signs that the connection was progressing. But inner peace anchors your awareness in the present. Instead of asking what the future will bring, you begin appreciating what already exists in this moment. And this presence transforms the way you experience life. Your emotional stability no longer depends on external events. You do not need someone else's attention to feel valuable. You do not need reassurance to feel secure. You do not need answers to feel calm. The peace you feel comes from within. And that internal stability creates something incredibly powerful. Freedom. Freedom from emotional dependency. Freedom from constant mental analysis. Freedom from the fear of losing something that once felt impossible to replace. Ironically, this freedom often reveals something surprising. The connection itself begins to feel lighter. Earlier, the thought of losing the twin flame may have felt devastating. Now, the idea of reunion or separation no longer carries the same emotional intensity. Both possibilities can exist without disturbing your inner balance. This does not mean you prefer one outcome over the other. It means your peace is no longer dependent on the outcome at all. This is the moment when the twin flame journey reaches one of its deepest spiritual lessons. Love was never meant to create suffering. Love was meant to awaken awareness. The earlier stages of the journey revealed your fears, your attachments, and your emotional wounds. But this stage reveals something far more important: your natural state of being. A state of calm presence. A state where your heart remains open, but your sense of self remains grounded. In this state, you no longer chase love. You simply embody it. Your energy becomes quiet and steady. You interact with others without hidden expectations. You give affection freely, without needing anything in return. You experience relationships without the pressure to define or control them. This is the energy of someone who has rediscovered inner harmony. And when a person reaches this state, something interesting often begins to happen in the broader dynamics of life. Opportunities appear more naturally. New relationships enter your life without effort. Creative inspiration flows more easily. Your presence itself begins to attract experiences that align with your inner balance. Why? Because peace changes the frequency of your energy. When someone carries anxiety, attachment, and emotional turbulence, their energy reflects instability. But when someone carries calm, self-love, and acceptance, their energy reflects wholeness. And wholeness is magnetic. This is why many spiritual teachings describe inner peace as the highest form of attraction. Not attraction in the romantic sense alone, but attraction in the sense of harmony with life itself. The twin flame connection was never meant to take you away from this harmony. It was meant to guide you toward it. The intense emotions of the earlier stages were catalysts. They revealed the parts of you that needed healing. They exposed the areas where love had been replaced by fear. And through that process, they led you toward the deeper truth of your own soul. The truth that peace does not come from another person. It comes from within. And once that peace becomes stable inside you, something extraordinary becomes possible. The connection between two souls can finally exist without attachment, without fear, without the desperate need to secure the future. In that state, love transforms into something much quieter, but infinitely more powerful. It becomes presence. It becomes understanding. It becomes a peaceful recognition between two whole individuals. And this peaceful state is precisely the moment when the paradox of the twin flame journey begins to reveal itself completely. Because the moment you feel whole without them is often the moment the possibility of union truly begins. After the long journey through attachment, separation, letting go, self-love, and inner peace, something remarkable begins to unfold. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. In fact, it is almost invisible at first, but it changes everything. This is the stage where the deepest paradox of the twin flame journey reveals itself. Union often becomes possible only when you no longer feel that you need it. For someone who is still in the earlier stages of the journey, this idea can feel confusing or even frustrating. How can something so meaningful appear only after you stop chasing it? How can a connection that once felt like the center of your emotional world become something you are no longer dependent on? The answer lies in understanding what union truly represents. Many people begin the twin flame journey believing that union is the final reward for enduring the pain of separation. They imagine that reunion will finally bring closure, happiness, and emotional fulfillment. They believe that once the two people come back together, everything will fall into place. But the deeper truth is that union is not the reward for longing. It is the natural result of transformation. Union cannot occur when two people are still searching for completion through each other. It can only occur when both individuals have discovered their own wholeness. Earlier in the journey, love was mixed with attachment. There was longing, desire, and sometimes even desperation. The connection felt powerful, but it also carried emotional weight. Both people could feel the intensity, and that intensity often created imbalance. One person moved closer. The other stepped back. The energy between them struggled to find harmony. But once inner healing begins to take place, the energy of the connection starts to change. The person who once felt they needed the relationship in order to feel complete no longer carries that belief. Their happiness is no longer dependent on whether the twin flame returns. Their sense of identity no longer revolves around the connection. They have rediscovered their own life, their own purpose, their own inner peace. This shift may seem subtle from the outside, but energetically it is profound. Because the moment someone stops needing a relationship to validate their worth, they begin to embody a completely different presence. Their energy becomes calm, grounded, open. There is no longer an invisible pressure surrounding the connection. No expectation that the other person must behave in a certain way. No silent demand for reassurance. Instead, there is simply acceptance. If the connection returns, they welcome it. If it does not, they continue living a full and meaningful life. This is the moment when attachment dissolves completely. And without attachment, the dynamic between the two souls can finally breathe. Many people are surprised by what happens next. Because when the chasing energy disappears, the energetic balance between the two people shifts. The person who once felt overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection may begin to feel something new. Curiosity. They may start remembering the connection differently. Without the pressure that once surrounded it, the bond may begin to feel lighter, safer, more natural. Sometimes they reach out unexpectedly. Sometimes circumstances bring the two people into contact again. Sometimes the reconnection happens slowly, through small moments rather than dramatic gestures. But the most important change is not the external events. It is the internal state of the person who once spent so much energy chasing the connection. Because now, when the possibility of reunion appears, they approach it from a completely different place. Earlier, the thought of union may have felt urgent. It felt like something that had to happen in order for life to feel complete. Now, union feels different. It feels like a choice rather than a necessity. They no longer approach the connection with fear of losing it. They approach it with openness. They no longer seek validation from the other person. They bring their own sense of worth into the relationship. They no longer expect the other person to fill emotional gaps. They arrive already whole. This is why the paradox of union exists, because true union requires two complete individuals, not two halves searching for completion, two whole people sharing their lives freely. Earlier in the journey, the connection reflected the wounds of both individuals. It revealed fears of abandonment, control, and emotional dependency. But once healing takes place, the connection begins to reflect something entirely different. Growth, balance, mutual respect, and most importantly, freedom. Freedom to love without clinging. Freedom to connect without controlling. Freedom to walk beside each other without losing individuality. When two people meet in this state, the energy between them feels completely different from the beginning of the journey. There is still recognition, still familiarity, still the quiet sense that something meaningful exists between them. But the emotional chaos is gone. The urgency is gone. The fear is gone. Instead, there is calm. The kind of calm that feels almost sacred. It is the calm of two souls who have already faced their shadows and returned to the light within themselves. And in that calm space, union no longer feels like a dream that must be achieved. It feels like a natural continuation of two lives that have already become whole on their own. This is why so many people describe the moment of reconnection as strangely peaceful. They expected fireworks. They expected dramatic declarations of love. But what they experienced instead was something quieter and deeper. A sense of familiarity. A sense of understanding. A sense that the long journey had transformed both of them. Because the real purpose of the twin flame path was never to create emotional dependency. It was to guide both souls towards spiritual maturity, to help them release attachment, to teach them self-love, to lead them toward inner peace. And once those lessons are integrated, the possibility of union emerges naturally. Not as something that must happen, but as something that finally can happen. Because now the connection is no longer driven by need. It is guided by freedom. And freedom is the foundation of the deepest love two souls can ever share. After the long inner journey of healing, growth, and rediscovering personal peace, something unexpected sometimes happens in the twin flame story. The two people meet again. Not always in a dramatic way. Not always in a moment that feels like destiny unfolding before their eyes. Often it happens quietly. A message appears after years of silence. Two people cross paths unexpectedly, or life circumstances simply bring them back into each other's orbit. But what makes this moment truly remarkable is not the reunion itself. It is how different the energy feels compared to the beginning. Because the people who are meeting again are no longer the same individuals who first encountered each other. The earlier version of themselves carried wounds that had not yet been seen. They carried fears they had not yet faced. They carried emotional needs they did not yet understand. At the start of the twin flame connection, the attraction was powerful but unstable. It was like two mirrors reflecting both light and shadow at the same time. The connection awakened love, but it also awakened insecurity. It created closeness, but it also created fear. That is why the relationship often entered the cycle of running and chasing. Both people felt the intensity, but neither fully understood how to hold it. Now, after years of growth, something fundamental has changed. Both individuals have walked through their own healing journeys. They have faced their own loneliness. They have learned how to rebuild their lives without relying on the other person. They have discovered their own identity outside the connection. This transformation creates a completely new foundation for interaction. When they meet again, the energy between them is calmer. There is still recognition, still the quiet feeling that something meaningful exists between them. But the emotional urgency that once defined the connection has faded. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, both people feel grounded. Earlier, the connection might have felt like a storm, intense, unpredictable, emotionally consuming. Now it feels more like a calm ocean.
Deep, steady,
peaceful. One of the most surprising aspects of this stage is how natural the reconnection can feel. There is often no need to force deep conversations immediately. No need to explain every detail of the past. Both people intuitively sense that the journey itself has already created the necessary understanding. Sometimes they simply sit together and talk about ordinary things. Life updates,
work, family,
personal experiences that shaped them during the years apart. And yet, beneath those ordinary conversations, there is a quiet awareness that both people have changed. They speak differently. They listen more carefully. They carry themselves with greater emotional stability. The connection no longer feels like something fragile that must be protected. It feels like something strong enough to exist naturally. This is the difference between connection driven by attachment and connection supported by maturity. Earlier, each interaction may have carried hidden expectations. A message needed to be answered quickly. A conversation needed to confirm the connection. Every small moment felt like proof of something larger. Now, the pressure is gone. Communication flows freely. Silence no longer feels threatening. Space between interactions no longer creates anxiety. This freedom is one of the clearest signs that both individuals have grown. Because the deepest form of love does not require constant reassurance. It exists comfortably even in moments of distance. Another remarkable change appears in the way both people perceive each other. Earlier in the journey, the twin flame may have been idealized, placed on a pedestal, seen as someone who held the key to emotional fulfillment. Now, the perception becomes more balanced. They are still deeply appreciated, but they are no longer viewed as someone who must complete your life. Instead, they are seen as another human being who has their own path, their own struggles, and their own growth. This shift allows genuine intimacy to develop, because true intimacy can only exist between equals, not between one person seeking completion and another person trying to escape pressure. When two whole individuals meet again, the connection transforms into something entirely new. It becomes a partnership rather than a pursuit. Two lives moving alongside each other rather than one life chasing the other. In this stage, conversations often feel more meaningful, not because they are dramatic or emotionally intense, but because they come from authenticity. Both people speak honestly about their experiences. They share how the time apart helped them grow. They acknowledge the pain of the past without becoming trapped inside it. There's often a sense of gratitude that emerges. Gratitude for the lessons the connection brought. Gratitude for the personal transformation that occurred during the separation. And sometimes, there is even gratitude for the separation itself. Because without it, neither person would have discovered the strength they now carry. Many people who experience this stage describe a strange realization. The union they once dreamed about no longer feels like a goal that must be achieved. Instead, it feels like a natural possibility. If the relationship continues to grow, they welcome it. If life eventually leads them in different directions, they still feel peace. This mindset may seem surprising after everything the connection once meant, but it reflects the highest stage of emotional maturity. Because love that is truly free does not cling to outcomes. It simply allows life to unfold. And ironically, this is exactly the state that allows union to become sustainable. Because when two people no longer approach the relationship with fear, control, or emotional dependency, the connection finally has the stability it lacked before. There is no longer a runner. There is no longer a chaser. There are only two individuals choosing to walk together. The relationship becomes a space where both people can grow without losing themselves. Where love is expressed through presence rather than attachment. Where closeness is built through trust rather than urgency. This is the quiet beauty of mature twin flame union. It does not feel chaotic. It does not feel dramatic. It feels peaceful, almost simple. Two souls who once triggered each other's deepest wounds now reflect each other's deepest growth. And in that reflection, something extraordinary becomes possible. A relationship that is no longer driven by need, but guided by love. After everything the twin flame journey has revealed, after the attachment, the longing, the separation, the healing, and the rediscovery of self, one final realization slowly begins to emerge. Union was never the true destination. Transformation was. At the beginning of the journey, most people believe that the purpose of the connection is simple. Two souls are meant to find each other and stay together. It sounds romantic. It sounds beautiful. And it fits perfectly with the way love stories are often told. But the twin flame journey rarely unfolds like a traditional love story. Instead of moving smoothly toward partnership, it often begins with emotional intensity and then moves into confusion, distance, and long periods of separation. For someone experiencing this path, the process can feel unfair. Why would such a powerful connection appear only to disappear? Why would two people who feel so deeply connected struggle so much to remain together? These questions are natural, but they arise from the assumption that the connection exists primarily to create a relationship. The deeper truth is that the connection exists to create awakening. The moment two twin flames meet, something within both souls begins to activate. Hidden emotions surface. Old wounds appear. Beliefs about love, worth, and identity begin to shift. The connection acts like a mirror that reflects not only your capacity to love, but also the parts of yourself that still need healing. At first, this mirror can feel overwhelming. It shows fears that were previously hidden. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. These fears often drive the early stages of a journey. One person may chase the connection, believing that holding on to the relationship will bring security. The other may run from the intensity, feeling unprepared for the emotional depth the connection requires. But as the journey continues, both individuals are slowly guided toward the same lesson. Wholeness cannot come from another person. It must come from within. This is the central teaching of the twin flame path. The connection does not appear to complete you. It appears to reveal where you have forgotten your own completeness. Through the stages of longing and separation, the soul begins to recognize something important. The love you were searching for in another person already exists within you. The peace you hope to find through union can only be created inside yourself. The validation you once sought from another person can only become stable when it comes from self-acceptance. Once these realizations take root, the entire meaning of union begins to change. Earlier, union may have felt like the moment when everything would finally make sense. A point where the pain of the journey would disappear and happiness would take its place. But the deeper understanding reveals something different. Union is not the moment when your life becomes complete. Union is the moment when two complete lives choose to walk together. This difference is profound, because it removes the burden that once rested on the relationship. No longer does one person need the other to provide emotional stability. No longer does the connection carry the responsibility of fixing wounds that belong to the past. Instead, the relationship becomes something lighter, something healthier, something that can grow naturally because both individuals already stand firmly within themselves. When union emerges from this place of wholeness, it looks very different from the romantic fantasies that many people imagine at the beginning of the journey. It is not dramatic. It is not overwhelming. It is peaceful. There is a quiet sense of understanding between the two people. They recognize how far they have come. They respect the individual paths that shaped their growth. They appreciate the connection without feeling controlled by it. In this stage, love becomes a conscious choice. Not something driven by emotional dependency. Not something held together by fear of loss. But something chosen freely each day. Two people wake up and decide that sharing their lives brings joy and meaning. And because that choice comes from freedom rather than necessity, the relationship becomes incredibly resilient. It can adapt. It can grow. It can evolve alongside the personal journeys of both individuals. Yet one final paradox remains. Some twin flame journeys reach this stage and naturally move into partnership. Others reach the same level of personal transformation, but continue along separate paths. At first, this idea can feel disappointing to those who hope that every twin flame story ends with reunion. But when someone truly understands the purpose of the journey, they see this outcome differently. Because the greatest gift of the connection was never the relationship itself. It was the awakening it created. Before the journey began, you may have believed that happiness depended on finding the right person. You may have believed that love was something you needed to secure and protect. You may have believed that your sense of completeness depended on another soul. But through the experiences of this path, you discovered something deeper. You discovered your own strength, your own resilience, your own capacity for unconditional love. You learned how to let go of control, how to face emotional pain without losing yourself, how to cultivate peace within your own heart. These lessons remain with you regardless of whether the twin flame becomes a life partner. And in many ways, this realization represents the highest form of union. Union with your own soul. When that inner union exists, every relationship in your life begins to change. You approach people with openness rather than fear. You give love freely, without attaching your worth to the outcome. You allow connections to grow naturally rather than forcing them to fit a specific expectation. In this state, love becomes something expansive rather than restrictive. It becomes an energy that flows through your life rather than a destination you must reach. And this is the final wisdom of the twin flame journey. The person who once felt like your missing half was actually a catalyst, a mirror, a guide who helped you remember who you truly are. Not someone incomplete, not someone searching for validation, but a whole soul capable of creating love, peace, and meaning from within. When two people who have reached this understanding meet again, union becomes possible in the purest sense. Not because they need each other, but because they choose each other. And when love is chosen from a place of wholeness, it becomes something extraordinary. A partnership between two souls who have already found themselves, walking together, growing together, not as halves seeking completion, but as two complete beings sharing the same path forward.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you.